Welcome to the Cincinnati Bengals Draft Preview Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network, brought to you by MyBookie.ag. To find out more about MyBookie.ag, go to thegruelingtruth.com, click on the MyBookie.ag banner at the top of the page, and by using that or the promo code TGT100, you get up to 100% cash back on your first deposit. So if you put $300 in, you got $600 to play with. I am your host for the Cincinnati Bengals Weekly Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in our guest today from, I think you work for the Cincinnati Jungle, correct, Matt?
I do.
So, CincyJungle.com writer, Matt Minich. How you doing, Matt?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. Joe Kelly's supposed to be on tonight, but as of right now, I think probably something work-wise has popped up. So hopefully Joe will be on here a little bit later in the show. But let's just go ahead and start this off. This is the first time since I had, hair that the Cincinnati Bengals have a new football coach. So what's your take on Zach Taylor and the staff that has been hired?
It's exciting to have some change. I think it was overdue, and last year seemed like a good time to move on, and this year it's definitely overdue. So it's a young staff. There's some unknowns there. A bit aggravating that it took us so long to find a DC, and that ended up being an older guy who didn't have much experience. But overall, this is the time. You go through cycles as a Bengals fan, and this is the time for optimism. So I'm trying to.
How old are you, Matt?
I'm wishing and I'm hoping.
How old are you?
How old am I? 35.
Okay. See, I'm 50. There's no cycles for me. I'm just pessimistic. And my worry is this. My worry is nothing was ever really Marvin's fault completely. That is more the fault of ownership. And I think when we look at this draft, I think it's obvious they need offensive line help. They need linebacker help. And the thing that would tip me off is this. If they go out and they pick an offensive lineman, I would feel much better about this team. If they pick a quarterback, then I'm going to think that nothing has changed from the past.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know if either one of those things is going to happen. Just the feeling I get, and believe me, I would love to draft an offensive tackle at the top of this draft. I'm a big fan of Jonah Williams from Alabama. And I could get on board with some of the other guys, but I don't think I think they think they're okay with Bobby Hart.
God, I know. That's why I think nothing's changed. By the way,
yeah, that's true. And that seems to be from everything the O-line coach is praising him. So that really worries me. And even when they signed him a year ago, people were talking about how he was good 2 years ago with the Giants, and I watched every bit of film.
He was shitty with the Giants.
He wasn't. He was never good with the Giants. Even the year they said he was good. So, so that's a real concern. I think we drafted an offensive tackle because we have to, because they lost Wahi, they lost Jake Fisher, they lost Andre Smith. So they have zero depth at tackle.
That makes it sound not so bad that we lost all three of those guys, because they all three were terrible, by the way.
Well, you need bodies too. So
no, you don't.
Right now, Clint Bowling's probably playing right tackle if anything happens to either one of these guys. So, I think they'll draft tackles, but I think they're looking for a swing guy and for a developmental guy. I don't think they're looking for a starter, so I don't think we're going to see that guy in the first round.
Yeah, and like I said, that's my concern, because with Bobby Hart playing right tackle, this team has no shot to make the playoffs. And the other thing is we have injury concerns at left tackle. He's 31 years old, Glenn, and that's what worries me. And I think that if you were to draft, I have basically one of two ways I want him to go. I want him to go with an offensive lineman. If it's Jonah Williams, to me, you look to trade down into the teens or the early 20s, and you're probably still going to get Jonah Williams and maybe pick up an extra second-round pick. If I'm picking a guy that I think can plug and play right now, I like Ford. And I like Dillard a little bit, but he reminds me a little bit too much of Cedric Ogbuehi.
Yeah, to me, Jonah's my number one guy. I think, we've seen some connection with them at Ford. They loved to be around Oklahoma in the past. There were rumors last year about them taking a tackle from Oklahoma as well. Obviously, it's a different coaching staff, but it's still
this is a better tackle from Oklahoma than what you had last year too. I think.
This certainly is. With both Williams and Ford, they're a touch on the short side, which is the issue with both of them. Why both could potentially fall. Dillard is a guy who I don't love on film, but the NFL seems to be behind him. From all the whispers we're hearing, that he seems to be really high up. He's a little stronger than measurables than those guys. And then the other guy that gets a lot of buzz is Jawan Taylor. And
I'm not
really
Taylor.
sure.
Yeah,
neither am I. He's pretty. He's a pretty solid right tackle. At Florida, but he didn't really do anything that sticks out to me that gets me excited. Having said that, I feel more comfortable
than him and Bobby Hart. Yeah, I would feel more comfortable with you, Matt, and I don't think you're that big. So
no, but in my day, he kicks that pretty well. So
okay, how much did you weigh, Matt?
Peak like 215.
Yeah, so don't worry about that, Matt. Don't quit your day job. Keep writing for the Cincinnati Juggle. But, yeah, I mean, and my problem here is if you're going to get a tackle, it's going to have to be quickly because I really think there's only 3 guys worth a first-round pick for sure, maybe 4. So those guys are going to be gone probably when you get to the second round. And there's really no depth after the 4 guys because Greg Little's a guy I've heard a lot of people talk about, but I'm not a big fan of his. I don't think he's going to be very good. I think it would be like, bringing Cedric Ogbuehi back.
That's a pretty sound comparison. And having said that, I like Little. I think he could be a good developmental guy. Like Ogbuehi could have been a good developmental guy. They took him really high. Obviously, they failed to develop him. I think Little gets a lot of negative press because he was looked at as a top guy right away, and he's not that guy. But I think he's a guy. You get him in the second. There's a possibility of developing something there. But again, that's not going to be your starter. That's the guy who's going to be your swing guy, and you're trying to develop to replace Hart. I think there's a few other guys who are similar in that you can get in the second, third round. David Edwards, big, tall guy from Wisconsin. Real good in pass pro. It can be a little awkward though, like tall guys tend to be. Caleb McGrary from Washington, real solid pass protection, real people mover in the run game as well. Those are a couple of guys that I feel are pretty decent, but again, not those top guys that you're really going to be seeing step in and do something from day one.
Yeah, but they could step in from day
Yannick
one.
Juice from West Virginia.
I
think he's real good pass, but a little shorter.
We're talking about Bobby Hart. So, I mean, come on. They could draft a guy in the 7th round. They could beat out Bobby Hart if they actually tried to.
We got Rod Taylor coming back, so.
Really? All right. The other thing that strikes me, though, about Ford and the kid from Bama, Jonah Williams, is I think they're a lot more versatile than these other guys. And if tackle doesn't work out, I think they could play guard. And I know I got a buddy that used to play at Alabama that does some college football shows with us, and he said Jonah Williams was a guy they were actually wanting to move to center last year, but they couldn't find a good replacement at tackle.
Yeah, I'd heard that about him too. That he was a good guy that could be moved around, and obviously there's a lot of value to that. I mean, you look at Clint Bowling for the Bengals, and I joked about they're going to have to put him at tackle, but they've done it in the past, and they could do worse than that. And you
Bobby
really
Hart.
need that guy because the depth is no kidding. But I mean the depth is so limited, and they keep around so few offensive linemen in the NFL. That it's definitely important to have that guy.
Yeah. Now, actually, the way I would like them to go, and hear me out, because I would rather them go tight end. I'd rather them take the Hawkinson kid because he's a good enough blocker. You can put him right next to Bobby Hart when you want to run, and he's a kid that can stretch the field. And the thing that's scary there, if you get him, and Tyler Eifert somehow stays healthy, you could really do some stuff with those two, A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, absolutely. Hockenson he's my dream pick for them.
Me too.
Of guys that are realistic to be there, that's the guy I want because honestly, of the guys that I'm expecting to be there at that point, I think he can make the biggest impact on the team right away. And yeah, you put him in the mix there. Whether with AJ, with Boyd, with Mixon and Gio catching balls in the backfield, and whether it's Eifert and another tight end, or if John Ross catches on. You've got some players there. There's exciting possibilities with that. And he's a guy who his ability to gain yards after the catch is incredible. He's not an absolute blazer. I mean, he's fast for a tight end, but obviously he's not, doesn't have receiver, deep speed. But the way he just makes guys miss, he just does real subtle moves. Never, not a guy who's going to run out of bounds or lowers his shoulder, gaining extra yards everywhere he can. Between that, his ball skills and his ability to block, he is the complete package. And you're not going to find that anywhere else in this draft. Noah Fant and Irv Smith and actually of the next couple, I'm not a huge fan of Noah Fant or Irv Smith, but Jay Sternberger would be the next guy I look at tight end. But none of those guys can block to save their lives. The guys that you're going to find to block are going to be deeper in the draft. Guys like Foster Moreau, Tommy Sweeney, but they're not the dynamic receiving threats that Hockenson is. Hockenson is the complete package. He's the only one that is.
Yeah, he's the closest thing to Gronk since Gronk, I think.
Yeah, it's a tough and unfair comparison to make, but yeah, he is. He's a complete package, and that's the thing that people don't always consider with Gronk is on top of everything he did as a pass catcher and how impossible he was to cover, that dude could block too. That's going to be a big problem the Patriots have to solve this year is finding that other guy to put in that role.
All right. Now, the other question is at linebacker, of course. Burfict's gone. He hadn't really been here the last 2 years anyways. When you look at linebacker, my problem with linebackers, I don't think there's a guy worth picking that high. Devin White, to me, is a great athlete. I don't think the instincts are very good. Devin Bush, I worry about the size, and my biggest worry with both of these guys is the size. They're both around 230, 235, and I would think that with those guys, you would just attack them downhill, straight at them, running the ball, and I think they both would have difficulties with that, and you're in the AFC North where that's what teams are known for.
I think we need to break the Bengals of having the big, thick, in-the-box linebackers because I think that was a huge problem in their pass game last year. None of those linebackers Preston Brown was supposed to be awful in coverage, and he was better than the rest of them were.
Well, I thought Preston Brown actually, until he got hurt, played pretty well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that was, coming in, that was the scouting report on it. That's what people were saying was, well, yeah, he's really good against the run, but he's not so good against the pass. He was better than anybody else they had against the pass. And that includes Vigil and Evan, some of those guys that we've expected a lot out of that really haven't developed. I've got no problem with going a little bit lighter to have a guy who's a better athlete. I think both of those guys are superb athletes. I'm with you on White. I don't think the value's quite there. I would
take Bush over White in a heartbeat. I wouldn't have a problem with him taking Bush because I know how big a need it is. How about this? What about Mack Wilson? Because I think Mack Wilson has the best instincts when he's dropping into zone coverage. And is there any chance he could be available in the second round?
I think there is. He didn't test very well, and he kind of seems to have fallen off some people's boards. He's definitely not getting as much buzz anymore. Blake Cashman from Minnesota is starting to get a little bit more buzz. So there's a chance that anybody looking for a linebacker at the top of the second could go to Cashman or Voshon Joseph from Florida. They could go a different route with that. To me, both those guys, they're kind of ankle divers. They're not great tacklers. Yeah. I think Wilson, despite what appears to be athletic limitations, you don't see it on film. I believe he has 6 interceptions in his career. He had 4 as a junior. The guy makes plays on the ball, and that's really something that the Bengals need. Like, they've got some talented DBs, But not all those guys have great ball skills, and none of the linebackers really do. So yeah, they could use a guy like that. I think in the second, I would even with the problems they have at linebacker, they could take Bush or White in the first, and I wouldn't have a problem with taking Matt Wilson in the second. On top of that,
yeah,
I think he can be. I think he can be really good for him. Absolutely.
Yeah, and even Devin White, I wouldn't have a problem with because I understand it, and at least they would be trying to address a need.
Yeah.
When you look at it,
and this is what you do when you don't spend any money in free agency, you paint yourself into a corner where I really think that outside of the top guys, if something ridiculous happens because people are getting quarterback hungry and Josh Allen or Bosa's sitting there, I think outside of those guys, I think it's Devin White and it's Devin Bush on their board. Because they put themselves into a situation where they're not going to go out and sign another linebacker, so they think they have to do it.
From what you hear,
I
is
like
there
White
any
a lot.
chance?
I don't think he's going to be there though.
Is there any chance the Bengals could trade up or trade down?
There's been some rumor about it. I really don't think they're going to go quarterback. I think people want them to go for Haskins. I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't know why you trade up unless you're going quarterback.
What about Josh Allen?
Not worth it for
Josh Allen is a guy that I think might be worth it.
Josh Allen's an interesting one, but that's really far to go. I think assuming Kyler goes 1, Bosa goes 2. I don't know how the Raiders don't take him at 3.
Well, I think the Raiders. Don't be surprised if the Raiders take DK Metcalf.
I would be shocked.
I wouldn't be shocked whatever the Raiders do. But, DK Metcalf can run really fast straight down the field, and the Raiders love that. Unfortunately for the Raiders,
that's true.
This is not 1975. So,
after the whole Khalil Mack thing, I really think they have to get a pass rusher at the top of this draft, or they're just going to look like complete idiots.
Well, that's what they usually look like. I mean, get rid of Khalil Mack made them look like complete idiots.
Well, I don't want to get too much into Allen and the Raiders, but I think that guy reminds me of Von Miller. That guy could. He's not going to make you forget about Khalil Mack, but he can make you get over it, I think.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I would go for him. I don't care what they trade him, as long as they don't give him Andy Dalton. They give him A.J. Green. If I could get Josh Allen, I would take that because the thing about Josh Allen is he's not just an edge rusher. I mean, he's pretty good in coverage too.
Yeah, he's got a really good skill set. Like I said, it reminds me a lot of Von Miller. I think he's excellent coming off the edge, really really strong guy at the top of the draft. In terms of edge rushers, and they've talked to a lot of edge rushers. From Allen, that seems like a reach, but they talked to Rashawn Gary. They talked to Montez Sweat. So there's been a little bit of buzz around there. The one guy I haven't really heard any connection with them with that I think would be a pretty good gift for them at 11 is Brian Burns from Florida State.
You like Burns? I'm not a big fan of Burns. I think he's a second-round guy. And I really am not a fan of Rashawn Gary.
Well, it's different issues. So, I think with Burns, I think he's got a really, really good skill set. Super bendy, super flexible coming around the edge. High motor was going. I think he's a guy who's got a really good, skill level as a pass rusher. Whereas Gary's more the kind of the raw talent.
He's a bull rusher.
I look at and that's what I look at Gary, and I think that he has the potential as an inside rusher to be what Ed Oliver already is. Yeah. And then he could play the run on the outside, which Ed Oliver can do, by the way, also. So he's being projected by most to be taken before Ed Oliver. I don't know why you don't just take Ed Oliver, because I think his ceiling is Ed Oliver. So
because I think the difference is this.
I don't know.
From what I've seen, Ed Oliver, if one move's not working, he can do something else. With Rashawn Gary, he has not developed that skill set yet. And my problem with that, and a guy that basically is a bull rusher, is usually those guys all of a sudden aren't developing those skills at 23 and 24 years old.
Yeah, and I think you can't expect too much development at the NFL level. Those guys, their coaches are more about scheme. They're not really working on the technique stuff. They don't really have time to anymore with the CBA. So I don't see guys developing at that level either. And I'm with you on that.
Well, you know what I think it is? I think it's this. I think that if you're 22 or 23 years old, you've been coached through Pee Wee, junior high, high school, and college. If you haven't developed other moves yet, that's because either number one, you had a poor coaching staff all the way through that just was good enough with good enough, or he's not really interested in working to make his game better. So when he practices, he just practices what he's good at, where what makes a great and a complete player is actually working on your weakness instead of trying to work on your strength.
Yeah, and I mean, Rashawn Gary, he's a guy, when he wins, he can win on being big and strong. He's probably used to that. And he was coached by, I'll go ahead and say, one of the best defensive coaches in all of football, not just college football, in Don Brown. Honestly, that guy's I've met the guy personally, and he's a butt kicker. And if that guy's not getting him going and not getting those things fixed with him, I don't like the odds of Lou or Emeraro or whatever his name is.
Or whoever the defensive line coach is. I mean, that's my whole problem with this team. When I look at this draft, I think this draft is going to tell us how serious this team is about winning. And we go back to Zach Taylor. My problem there is when you look at Zach Taylor, he's a guy that's going to be calling plays for the first time ever as a offensive coordinator. But he's also going to have to manage the game as the head coach. And to me, that's what scares the hell out of me about this whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the idea of going for, this young offensive guy is this in vogue thing just because we saw the Rams have success with it. And the fact of the matter is, yes, the Rams had success. Yes, the Bears had some success. Both of them had really good, really experienced defensive coordinators. And with the Rams particularly, they had a defensive coordinator who had NFL head coaching experience.
And he's one of the best DCs that ever lived.
Absolutely. And that's a guy that could at least, coach the head coach on the game management aspect of things as well, and who the head coach knew he was not going to have to worry about that defense because he was going to get them going.
Yeah. Plus,
obviously
the
spending
Rams
money
had
on the defensive side of the
the
ball
Rams
didn't hurt
had
either.
Todd Gurley too. So, and when Todd Gurley was
the
not
Bengals got Joe
there,
Mixon.
yeah. But what I'm saying is, with the Rams, yeah, but they also had an offensive line. We don't, so that's a big difference too. But the thing about that offense is, that offense was shut down pretty easily in the Super Bowl, and it's not like they were running up and down the field in the playoffs. So my thought is maybe people kind of got a beat on it. We had Todd Gurley, who was injured a little bit, which hurt them. I don't think Jared Goff's very good. I think Andy Dalton's 10 times better than Jared Goff.
Yeah, I'm with you on all of that. I mean, I think eventually defenses are going to figure things out when you get up against a guy who knows how to coach. And there aren't a ton of those around, but Belichick's that guy. So. And you saw it in the weeks before that with the Chiefs and with the Chargers too. Wasn't able to stop them like they did the Rams, but the way they were able to slow them down, definitely impressive.
All right, so when you look at this,
and the other edge rusher I just wanted to mention was Montez Sweat.
Oh, I like
some
him.
kind of heart condition or something.
Yeah.
Disclosed. Now here's the thing about him. Everybody talks about his speed. And what he did at the combine. What really caught me on film was he is explosive. He comes off the ball and he strikes with his hands.
Yes.
And that's something that just, as a coach, and you can probably relate. Like that's something that drives me crazy when I see guys just run around and then when they don't, use the bull rush as a setup to do some of those speed moves. He does that, and he does a really good job with it. Unfortunately, he is stiff as a board.
Yeah, there's
he
no
looks like
bend at the
Frankenstein
knee
running
there.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that definitely limits him. And Hopefully the heart condition is nothing. I think we're all scared because of what happened, with the defensive tackle from Michigan last year falling to the sixth round of the Raiders. The NFL teams might be scared off by it. Fortunately, everything's worked out for that guy so far. So even past that, the flexibility makes me wonder about taking the guy that high. But he is a guy I like. Reminds me a little bit, and this is going to turn some people off. He reminds me a little bit of Michael Johnson, but like when Michael Johnson was really good, like 5 years ago, and with a little bit more speed.
You mean that one year in 2013?
Yeah, that's the year. Yeah. But yeah, he's a tall, long guy. He strikes. He's got a little bit more speed than Johnson, and I think like Johnson, I think he could play a little bit inside too, in like nickel packages and stuff like that. So he's got some things going for him. But again, it's like, what are you expecting at 11? And I don't know if that's a guy that's got like an overwhelming talent that I think I'm going to get with nearly a top 10 pick.
All right, so when we look at this, I think that if they go quarterback, we're screwed, and this is the same thing. And 3 years from now, we're going to be drafting another quarterback. I think if you go offensive line, you go Hawkinson, you go linebacker, I think I would feel much better about this team and the way they're setting up. The division's not that good. The Steelers have lost a lot. They lost 2/3 of their triplets. The Browns are still the Browns to me until they do something all season long. The Ravens are a team that I think doesn't have a quarterback. They're going to be basically a run-oriented team. This is set up with a good draft, and by a good draft, I don't mean nail the first pick. They have to be able to hit 5 or 6 of these guys, because the one thing they've lacked the last few years was depth in their draft. And I know we did a draft preview show earlier today on Survive in Advance, and we had the case of Bill Belichick brought up. And to me, the reason Bill Belichick has been so good for 20 years with the Patriots is the fact that picks 3 through 7, he picks guys that are developmental guys that he can play on special teams until they're developed. And they develop depth that way. So when they have a right guard or a defensive tackle or a linebacker that goes down, they've got somebody that's been getting ready for that for the last 2 years. With the Bengals, the guys that get picked 3 through 7 are guys that are usually somewhere else or nowhere a couple of years later.
Yeah, and I think they misuse their practice squad, and they try and stash guys there that everybody else knows are good, and they end up losing guys for that reason. The Patriots aren't afraid. The Patriots will move on from anybody. That's the other thing. They'll take shots in the draft.
And they'll do it a year early, too. They'll do it a year before they should do it.
They had a draft like 3 years ago where they only had 4 picks, and they have none of those guys left. I think Casey McDermott or something like that was from UCLA, the tackle. He plays for the Bills now. Oh, no, I'm sorry. They have Dietrich Wise. Dietrich Wise is left. Rivers had injuries. He's out. Doc Rivers from Youngstown. And there was Antonio Garcia was a tackle they drafted in that class. They cut, he had injuries and he got cut too. So they're not afraid to move on. And the other thing is, it's not just about who they're picking Thursday through Saturday. It's who they're picking up Sunday too.
Yes, the free agents.
In 2 Super Bowls, they Malcolm Brown obviously didn't start. Malcolm Butler didn't start that game, but had the play that won the game against the Seahawks. That was an undrafted rookie sticking in there in the biggest game of the year. And this past year, J.C. Jackson is a stud. And if you don't watch the Patriots on a regular basis, you missed him because they didn't play him in the Super Bowl because they played more zone, so that was more of a recorded game. But J.C. Jackson was an undrafted free agent corner for them, who was an absolute stud playing man-to-man all year. So, I mean, it's not even just the draft. It's picking up those guys, and they create depth and get it even, without resources. J.C. Jackson's a guy anybody could have had. And they went out there and get those guys. So, they definitely have a major problem with depth. I mean, last year they were pretty good at the beginning of the year, and it was just as 1 injury and 2 injuries. A couple injuries stretched them out. Similar to what happened with the Falcons, last year. They fall apart because they don't have the depth. And I think, I think a part of that too is that some of the guys that we see in starting roles are guys who are good enough, and the good enough guys need to be the guys that you're plugging in later.
Yeah.
When Alex Redmond and Trey Hopkins, some of these guys who are just okay get hurt. Like I don't want to know what their backups look like, because I know it's not very good.
Yeah. But all right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. We will be back. Matt will be with us. Matt Anderscavage from the Niner Empire will be with us tomorrow night. Anthony Servino from the FF Faceoff. Steve Risley, 1981 Indiana National Champion, will be comic relief during the NFL draft. And he's a basketball guy. He runs around in shorts. But we will be on a little bit before 8. Matt will be on a little bit after 8 with us, and we will be there all the way through the draft. Joe couldn't make it because he had something pop up at work, but hopefully Joe will be at the Bengals headquarters tomorrow when they're getting ready to make the pick, and we'll give him a call. We'll have special guests during the evening. And we will be brought to you by the Love Harder Project, which is a project started by Tim Flannery, basically to help fight against bullying and people that are, have physical ailments or something that's happened to them through the bullying. So they'll be one of the sponsors. We got a couple other sponsors. We'll bring it tomorrow night, but they're not paying as much. So we're going to go ahead and wrap the show up, Matt. We will be back tomorrow night, 8 o'clock live, for the NFL Draft. And I want to remind everybody, you can hear all of our shows on Zeno Live Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, and another 200 places you can find us. So basically, anywhere you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Matt Minich, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.